the networking. This is so fun and a lot of energy, which we love on a Wednesday morning. So welcome to our FEBE morning. I'm Janice Lapina, and I work here at the college, and we've been doing this now for a couple years. And so I just want to welcome you all here and thank our sponsor, Dunkin' Donuts. They have a location across the street, as well as one on 58 and then one at Camp's Corner. So when you're out and about, try to support them because they've done a great job supporting us. So I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question, please raise your hand and Brenna will bring around the microphone because we are recording these and putting them up on our website so folks that are watching them can also hear what the questions are. But I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Penn Berens, and he's going to talk to us about how Uber business models might apply to the entrepreneur in you. So Penn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning. I'm going to hobble around and from place to place, but I hope to use the board a little bit, so just keep your physical postures so that you might be able to see the board in case it's interesting. I definitely am not billing this as a presentation, but rather a discussion. My objective is to have you think about how things that might be involved in Uber can apply to your business success. And I'm not saying Uber is successful, but if you want to use dollars as a success factor and their capitalization at $60 billion or something like that, maybe it's worthwhile considering what they're up to. And it's not out of your reach. $60 billion may be out of your reach today, maybe even tomorrow. But what I want to invite you to do is think about the principles that Uber represents or the factors in their business that might apply to your business or your business idea or your past successes or even your past failures. You are the entrepreneurs. I just happen to be a guy who does some Uber driving and gets a kick out of coming to these things for almost as long as FEBE's been in existence. So let's start by, I know we'll have the normal orientation to introduce each other or introduce yourselves later, but let's start with a show of hands of who's never heard of Uber. Any hands?
I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Okay, that's good. Let's go to the other extreme. Are there any investors in Uber in the room?
Drivers?
No, investors, owners. Any wannabe investors in Uber, even before we discuss what Uber is? Good. Uber is referred to as a ride-sharing service, and all that means, it's another word for a taxi cab company. And I'll bet it's not too different from stagecoaches years and years ago in this country, or some handsome dude asking a pretty girl on the sidewalk to get up on the back of the horse and go for a ride, or the back of the motorcycle and go for a ride. There are factors that are different, and I want you guys to explore them. Now, getting to the middle ground, know nothing, and want to be an investor, how many people have ridden with Uber? Okay. How many people have downloaded Uber app but never ridden? That's cool. Somebody take a guess. How many countries do you think Uber might be operating in? Just pick a number, just for the heck.
37.
60? I think 60 is about right. Are you an Uber driver? That's the question I hadn't asked yet. Are there any other Uber drivers in the room? Yay.
Occasionally.
Okay, fair enough. So correct me on anything that I'm getting wrong. By almost any measure, Uber is a success as a business. It's not that old. I think it's less than 20 years old. And it's still having troubles. For example, Austin, Texas, a fairly large city, just voted to kick Uber out and Lyft. They kicked both of them out because they thought they wanted Uber to have better background checks on the drivers, and Uber said no, and I'm not sure Lyft even had a chance to say no. Lyft, by the way, is a competing rideshare service that also operates in multiple countries. And the interesting thing about Austin is folks like you in Austin, a high-tech city, said, okay, we'll start a new company. 5 new startups in a matter of weeks to offer an equivalent service. So what is the service? Let's hear from a couple of Uber riders.
Quickly, what was Austin's objection?
I think the objection was that Uber did not want to modify how it qualified drivers. It specifically didn't want to do background checks.
But the 5 that showed up are going to do background checks? Like the 5 companies?
I don't know, it's politics and it's Texas. So but that, use a word that's been popular lately, that's the presumptive solution. From an Uber driver, can you help describe what it is from a rider's point of view?
Super
Convenient,
convenient.
okay.
Fast.
Fast? Fast driving or fast response or? Okay. I'm putting some of these down because I think this is the meat of it. From an entrepreneur's perspective, what is it that you need to do to be successful? And I see we've got Jimmy John's here this morning. They're successful as far as I can tell. And there are some factors there that I think are common to when McDonald's started going countrywide and then worldwide. So fast, convenient, I heard. Convenient to the user, to the public. What are some other characteristics?
Cost effective.
Say again?
They're cheaper than cab.
Okay.
Generally.
The cab celebration.
7, what was the rate, 7 times?
Yeah, let's do an aside on that. We still haven't tried to describe what Uber is exactly, but one of its features is a moving price scale. They call it surge pricing. And sometimes there's just no surge, it's just their normal price. But other times, you can see on your phone, and by the way, this is one of the limitations of Uber is you have to have a smartphone or equivalent like an iPad or your portable computer or something like that. But their surge pricing can go into effect when when their computer, based on whatever secret modeling formula they have, says that demand is greatly in excess of supply. Remember, those are key words in economics and in your business entrepreneurial word, demand and supply. So when they see demand spiking and supply constant, they try and increase supply by offering higher prices. Now, pricing in Uber is very simple. They just undercut the competition, maybe by 30, 40, 50, even 60%. But when they surge, they can double or triple normal cab fares. Cab fares do the same, but not on a company-wide basis. It's individual drivers saying, $60 to get back to the airport. I know it only costs you 30 to get here, but it's going to cost you 60 to get back. That's surge pricing, or preferential pricing, or gouge pricing, whatever we want to call it.
When the price is, when there is a surge pricing, does the driver receive that same, in their commission, do they receive a higher rate of pay as well, or is that just going
Yep.
to Uber?
So the pay structure for Uber drivers, and I hesitate to call it pay structure because there's an argument about whether, there are challenges to whether Uber drivers are self-employed drivers using the Uber tool and are therefore on 1099s for reporting income, or whether they are employees. And I'm no expert in labor law, but from a personal point of view, I don't like to think of myself as an employee, because if I did, I'd be fired instantly because I sleep in half the time, or I don't drive, or I say, heck with it, I'm not feeling strong enough to keep driving today, or it's raining and I know there are more people out there, so I'm going to drive extra long. So in addition to surge pricing, there's voluntary participation by drivers at any time. So surge pricing, which does accrue to the drivers, is designed to bring drivers out of the woodwork. Don't stay in bed, or don't stay in front of the TV tube, or don't fall asleep in the parking lot. You know, wake up and accept some rides, because in the case of the Cavs parade, you can see prices 7 times as high. And that was 7 times as high as normal for, I think, more than an hour. And it was 6 and 5 and 4 and 3. And they can do that by geographic region, hot zones. So downtown Cleveland, as people decided to sort of give up celebrating the Cavs' victory as NBA champs for a year at least, they could have surge pricing there, but in Westlake it might be normal, or Avon normal, or now Akron normal, and now Youngstown normal. So it's not a global pricing phenomenon, it's very local pricing. Yes, sir?
The effect of the RNC was?
RNC was a little different. They've had experience, Uber has, whatever Uber is, however many people in California or whatever countries they think in. They've had experience with big crowds and big systems. So for the RNC, they managed to avoid surge pricing for the most part. I think they worked hard to avoid surge pricing, and I heard this directly for some Uber people, because they didn't want the bad press, the bad vibes from having gouge pricing or super pricing or surge pricing for a huge audience. There was some, I don't have the numbers, but it was not a big phenomenon. They avoided that largely by having high expectations on the part of all the local drivers, get out and drive, because it's going to be a great time, and it was just flat normal stuff, partly by bringing in more drivers. They actively recruited on a selective basis, and this is sort of important, selective. They could look at people's driving records or passenger comments and pick people to invite from Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh. I don't think they came from Philadelphia, but Columbus and Cincinnati and other surrounding areas. So the supply of drivers was already increased in anticipation of huge traffic. And I think I saw a number briefly of 1.5 million rides in Ohio during that week. So that's a pretty big number. Did I get your question?
You did, yeah.
Okay. I want to answer questions or have you each answer questions, but let's focus on why is it successful? I'm not even sure it's unique, so I'll just focus on successful. From riders.
Flexibility.
Okay. Flexibility for the company or for the driver or for the passenger? True.
Flexibility both ways, driver as well as
Okay. The flexibility and speed tie in closely together. So, easy. Yeah, so long as you have a cell phone, a smartphone. Some of you don't know how it works, even though you've got the app on your phone. Let me ask somebody who's got the app but has never used Uber why they haven't used it.
I haven't needed to.
Okay,
Based on DC, I want background checks.
fair enough.
So that's it.
Based on the DC incidents.
I lived in DC, so it was just no background checks. Like everybody gets background checks, and that's the only reason I haven't used it. So that's the only reason.
Okay,
But it seems super convenient. I've heard nothing but good.
so your alternatives?
Metro, taxi. Here I haven't used it in Ohio. I'm sorry, this is DC perspective. You can Metro.
Are the DC taxi drivers background checked?
You know, I think it never was marketed that way. I think it was just this company doesn't, so I think it's all marketing. If someone said, hey, taxis don't do it either, and they're like, oh, all right, so change that.
So consider that could be a propaganda pitch by taxi drivers. You know, they're not background checked, but they may not need to say, we are.
Yeah, I think that would be the counter.
Yeah.
Taxi drivers aren't either, period.
And I don't know that they're not. And different cities are different. Different states are different. So other issues from people who have downloaded the app but not used it. Any other?
Or something like that.
Okay, I'm a little bit stuck on your issue, and I'm not trying to promote Uber. Just examine it, if you will, a little bit in this session. You haven't needed to use it. So others in the room who have used it or considered using it, what kind of circumstances have you considered using it for? Bar? Bar is a big one. And that,
You have to go somewhere where you're going to have to pay for parking, like a special event downtown. It's nicer to park somewhere far away, and then we'll just Uber in, because then it's usually the Uber ride is a lot cheaper than parking, and then you don't have to walk to where you're going and walk back to the parking lot and stuff like that. Because, you know, special events in Cleveland, sometimes it's $40 to park close.
so when that's a combination of convenience and less expensive, but the less expensive that I think we put up first pertain to it's a less expensive ride than the alternatives, but it can be a less expensive excursion or adventure or trip, especially in the case of DUI threats. If you get a DUI the next day, you definitely spend a lot of money. And so if you can avoid that, not just by calling for Uber as you leave downtown or some other place and have to get back the next day with another Uber ride to get your car, it gets to the point where people who are regular riders say, why even go downtown in my car? I'll take Uber to downtown, avoid the parking, avoid the DUI coming home, and have inexpensive travels both ways. Now, that's not a pitch, that's just one of the things that I see as part of the development of the popularity.
To piggyback off his though, it's like you go to an event downtown, you know what you're gonna pay, right? But everybody, if you go to a ball game or whatever, everybody gets let out at the same time, and then that surge pricing comes up. So you never know how much it's gonna be when you're leaving the event.
You cannot forecast the price that Uber will want to charge you for a ride until the time you actually ask for the ride. Now you can forecast what their normal rates are. You can see that on your app anytime. Any of you want right now can open up an app and say, how much to the airport? And it'll show you. But in an hour, if you want to go to the airport and something at Spitzer is emptying out and 15 other people want to ride, you might have a factor of 1.2 or 1.5 on the pricing. At a ball game, it's the same thing in spades. It can be 3 or 4x. I hope we get national championships again so we can have sustained 7x's. It's worth the price, okay? And for drivers, making 7 times what they make in a ride can really make a difference. Drivers, and I'll use my language carefully, drivers charge, when they use Uber, X. They get 80% of X in all cases, surge pricing or not. Uber keeps 20% of X for administration, for marketing, for charge card processing, for some legal stuff. They buy insurance that affects Uber drivers, protects Uber drivers. It's gotten to be pretty good. Initially, there was no protection for an Uber driver going to a pickup to pick up a fare, but they've rectified that. You still have to have, as an Uber driver, you still have to have your own insurance.
It's tough. We both sell insurance. It's tough right now. A lot of gray area.
Yeah,
A lot of
I'd
carriers.
love to see the new contract if they did fix it, but, you know, if you don't have like a business endorsement on your personal auto policy, I think you're gonna be in trouble if there is an accident.
There are a couple of carriers, your competition probably,
All states working on it.
who've responded and currently have wraparound policies.
Farmers has one as well. There's a guy in my BNI group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always get that endorsement though on any policy that you have. But-
Yeah, for an extra fee usually.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So the trick is having $1 million of coverage from Uber, but it having gaps in it or questions or will they really honor it, and what else do I need to protect me? Okay? And usually what else you need to protect you is more than what you would just need to do for normal driving. So there are expenses to Uber drivers, such as the car, such as the mileage or your car expenses. But a lot of people are able to claim whatever the government allowance is of 55 or 54 or 57 cents a mile. And if you keep track of that, and there are applications to help you do that, the workload is significantly reduced. Now, Uber has all the data. They're just not reporting it or sharing it with the drivers as much as they might. They have all the data on how long and how many miles it took me to pick you up, as well as how many miles I had you in the car and where I dropped you off. And some of that they're reporting to me as a driver. I don't want to pay them any more to get the stuff they're not paying, so I stay silent.
When you break down, the car breaks down, you got 2 passengers. What happens?
I'm not sure. It's never happened to me. But presumably, you've got the whole world of Uber.
That's why I wonder if somebody else comes and picks them up.
The Uber riders can just request a new ride from that location, okay, and then file a complaint or file an issue or request a waiving of the fee.
But you as a driver don't have the responsibility to like call
I'm
Uber
sure,
and say, hey, my car just broke down.
not in any formal sense that I know of, but Uber drivers are at least as nice as your average taxi cab driver. We're just average people, and we'll try and help you out.
Do you have the ability to call Uber? Or there's no phone number you can call, it's all done? So if
It's-
somebody's upset, they send an angry email, and if the driver's mad, they send an angry email, and that's kind of wonderful.
Yeah, like how do you report things? Like for example, I have a friend who's a Uber driver and someone got sick in their car and it was like a huge fee tacked on, like a cleaning fee. But like, how do you report that to them?
Let me take that one first, and then the more general question of actually speaking to them. They do, it's no surprise that a California-based company that requires all of its users to have smartphones might also lean heavily on the drivers to have smartphones also. And in that context, they rely heavily on text messaging and emails, not answering the phone. But they're pretty responsive to any inquiries I've had of any type. And they've been responsive to some passengers who've had small claims or small issues. Passengers getting sick is not unanticipated. Part of Uber's initial popularity was to people of a mindset, I don't want to get a DUI, I don't want to drive home drunk and put myself and others at risk, so I'm going to go out and have a good time and Uber will take me home. And some of them, unfortunately, have to pay a cleaning fee because taking them home was a little messy. And when I started with Uber a couple of years ago, that was sort of the constant question. How often do you have to clean your car, you know, thoroughly, steam clean it? None so far. The more general question about are they responsive to the telephone? Not really, okay? But if they had 1.5 million rides in the 1 week in Cleveland, and they're operating in over 300 cities, 660 countries, I can see why they might prefer a more documentable
I just picture
methodology.
one guy sitting in an office somewhere collecting all the money. That's just a genius. He figured out how to do it all on a computer.
Well, don't, okay, I'll get to you in a sec. Collecting all the money. Uber does collect all the money. Okay, I say that I can pretend or I can describe that or think of or delude myself into thinking that it's my business, my rider, my car, my gas expense, my insurance expense, and all that. But since I've defaulted to let them collect all the money, I have to acknowledge that it's their business too. So they collect all the money. In general, they don't pay out until Thursday on a weekend and the following Sunday. So their weeks are it's the previous week that ends on Sunday, and they get the money in my bank account by Thursday. And they do have a mechanism to get it in the same day. I just choose not to use it, and a lot of people find it complicated. But in the vein of its being my money versus their money, they've got the float for 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, and even 1 day. 7 days of the float. It's a lot of money to be able to play with before they pay it out. You add those days up. It's a lot of days of earned income through a bank. Here's a banker, right? Yep. Yeah. How much can you make per day on a float? 0.5% or something like that?
Maybe, these days.
So call it 0.1%. Pretty cool.
Do you have to carry additional insurance and Uber, like for your Uber driver?
I'm gonna answer that from my personal perspective. I have used my normal insurance without any business riders and felt a little naked. I have always had Uber protection when I have a rider in the car, in addition to the required personal insurance. But lately, I've found a couple of carriers who would insure me in a sort of a wraparound and acknowledge the fact that Uber has $1 million policy that covers me en route to a pickup and with a pickup in the car. That's been a recent change. But Uber, I'm paying as part of my 20% fee to them. Notice the language, I'm pretending I'm an owner again. And I still have to pay my individual insurance at the same time. And just as an example of how it can get a little further, I've spent a lot of time paying off snow tires and new tires on my car over this last year. Why? Because I've got a car that isn't all that friendly in the snow, and I was driving in the winter and I didn't want to have any accidents, and so I had new rubber on the road. And I put new rubber on in the spring, so I've got new tires this spring, and I had new tires last fall. Not an inconsequential expense, and not something that you have to do, but it's worth planning for. In your own mind, in your own business models, in whatever you're doing in an entrepreneurial way, you have comparable expenses that you don't really have to do or don't really want to do or don't have to budget, that you might budget for as a contingency expense or something like that. So it's not that different.
Can you be a driver for Uber and Lyft?
Yes.
Like if you have a 15-passenger van and you're just driving around downtown, you can... You can't, I don't know of a way to do both, to serve both passengers at the same time, an Uber passenger and a Lyft passenger. But you can be qualified to drive for both, and you can be cruising around downtown and have both apps live on one phone. They can work simultaneously, and whichever one beeps first or hails you first, you can take, or you can discriminate. Well, this one's calling from a neighborhood that I don't really want to go to, so I'm going to ignore it. Is that allowed?
That's allowed, but believe me, they keep track. If they watch acceptance rates. It's like in your own business models, you have some certain key indicators of performance. Maybe it's a sales force that you watch for lost sales. That might be a flag to you, to be alert to somebody who was reporting a stream of sales in the funnel, and then he loses 10% of them regularly, and the other salespeople are only losing 1% of the people in the funnel. Might be a heads up for you. So the comparables between what we're talking about or looking at in Uber are not that far removed from what you can do or do.
Does it show you as the driver, obviously it shows you the pickup, but does it show you where they want to go to so you know like how far you're going to have to drive somewhere?
Once you make a pickup as a driver in Uber, you see where the patient, I came out of the healthcare industry.
You might pick somebody up.
I promise I don't want to hospitalize anybody. Not even with Obamacare. But I can't see where they want to go ahead of time.
So you might pick somebody up that needs to be driven 2 hours away, and then you're stuck driving 2 hours away.
Yes. However, there's a small chance that you do that long drive and somebody will want to ride back.
Right.
I found myself in Akron a few times and got rides. I drove an executive to out past Strongsville, and I said, oh, I'm way out here. Never get a ride. And I got another nice guy within 10 minutes coming back to this side of town. So in that sense, it's all sort of random. It's not unlike the vision of one person in an office answering a phone and figure out whether it's going to want a sales complaint, need to speak to a technician, I want to talk to the president, want to be a donor, whatever. You never really know what you're going to get. But the specific answer is no, you do not see the destination that the driver enters until you pick them up, when you start the ride.
Are you concerned about your safety as a driver? Because I've driven in taxis and I've had taxi drivers tell me they keep, even in smaller towns that are generally considered safe, like wasp spray in the front seat or something, and have to use it periodically to freeze people that they're driving around.
I think there's a fundamental difference between a cab driver and an Uber driver that has nothing to do with the driver and nothing to do with the passengers and nothing to do with the neighborhoods they come from. It's the fact that Uber has their credit card number. Are you going to really act up if you know that the company you're riding with has access to your credit card?
So is that through the app?
It's through the app. They can't use the app effectively until you can use the app on a demo basis. You can get familiar with it, but you can't order a ride until you've entered your credit card.
Somebody use like a prepaid Visa card or something like that?
Maybe they can, I don't know. And it's also not clear to me whether the card is pre-swept, pre-cleared by Uber before they allow a rider to request a driver. I'm guessing they do. I'm guessing this is Silicon Valley, for heaven's sake, that they check every card, every transaction before they even have a driver sent out. By the way, with respect to that, when you do get a hail as a driver, you only have something like 7 seconds to respond. Okay? If I don't take a ride request within a few seconds, it stops. I can no longer access that request, and it goes on to the next driver.
Is it technically illegal to use your cell phone when driving though?
I'm using the navigator on it.
I mean, can you get pulled over for being on your phone?
I'm not in conversation. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just using a map.
They're rewriting those laws, though. You can't even program a GPS and stuff now. Like
Yes.
any handheld device, you can't use at all.
Mine's permanently mounted. I don't know if that makes a difference, whether that would get me through the law. I would claim that my situation is no different than somebody with a car with a built-in GPS. Okay?
I just mean because you're using an app, like, I know texting and driving is illegal, but is Facebook messaging and driving legal? Seriously, I mean,
That's why they're rewording the
That's what I'm
laws. At first it was texting, but now they have to reword it because people are.
right. Well, I mean, I lived in California and I got pulled over for, I mean, you're not even allowed to talk on your cell phone unless it's a hands-free device while driving.
There are cities in Ohio that are that way.
I got a ticket for it,
Yeah,
actually.
there's cities in Ohio and you don't know, you might be driving to go visit a cousin.
Yeah.
So in Ohio, you might.
And New York State has had a similar to California law for at least 15, 20 years. You know?
What's going to happen when they pass a law that says the phones don't work in the car? I mean, because all the cell phone companies know when the phones are moving at X amount of speed.
I think that'll come after they rule out television in the car. I saw a couple of hands. Yours?
Mine was just kind of building off hers. Like, say you're an Uber driver and you feel uncomfortable with a specific person, maybe you're a girl driver, this guy, or just whatever.
That's what I was.
Do you just call, like, just replace, like, the Uber driver, call another guy and say, hey, can you pick this one up? Because I'm just not feeling comfortable.
So they have like rider.
Right. Like,
Yes.
okay.
I'm not exactly sure how it works. However,
Use it,
yeah.
you know.
I am clear on one part of the right to refuse. If you experience a driver that you don't want to ride again with ever, presumably their computers preclude you being matched with that same driver again. And it works both ways.
Okay, great.
If as a driver I have a passenger I'd never want to drive again,
You can mark it right beside this person or something.
and unfortunately it's not quite that simple. It's not a distinct system. It's just part of the rating system. So if I get rated a 1 by you, you'll never see me even if I'm sitting right outside of your building and you hail a car. Presumably. I have not seen it work. And presumably the same thing happened. If I say I can't stand her, Never let me try and give her a ride again.
It'd be neat if, like, if drivers could leave a message like, hey, so you know, like about a specific customer, you know, almost like you can see, like, if you're a girl, don't pick this guy up.
What?
I think to my point, I'm like, if you pull up and this person is obviously like heavily intoxicated and belligerent, you have a sense that, you know, this individual could present a danger to you, and you just say, hey, you know, I'm pretty comfortable about this, you know, find another alternative to see you later.
Right. You're always free to do that. To my knowledge, there are no laws against it except in the anti-discrimination arena. So you need to be a little bit careful that you're not abusing your right to refuse somebody. Okay? Yes, sir.
I have two questions actually. One, is it legal, or and if so, do you have like a dash cam system in a car to protect yourself against that situation?
I don't know the answer to that. I'll bet you somebody in the room could find out in a hurry by going on their phone or going on an iPad and find the answer within 2 minutes. Yeah, but I don't know personally. And I've never happened to see anything in writing about cameras on board to protect everybody.
They actually make specific tablets for vehicles now that it keeps track of your speed, and a forward-looking camera and a rear-looking camera. In case of an accident, it collects all this data, so it protects you from, you know, any false claims.
I'd have to get extra memory because I'm at risk all the time.
My second question is, does Uber have, or do they have plans of a larger, like, route transportation application? You know, for like larger vehicles or like airport service, that kind of thing?
I can fumble with some answers to that. The rideshare companies are constantly experimenting with different offerings. Not like you in a small business. Who do I market to? What unmet needs are out there? Where are unseen demands? How can I tweak my product? Well, they are things like grocery delivery, sort of a natural. Grocery shopping and delivery, maybe not quite so natural, but bear in mind that the drivers are on their own time. If they feel it's worthwhile, they can go stand in line at the supermarket, load up their car, deliver it. There are also things like multiple riders arrangements. In New York City, for example, they have a, I've forgotten what the name of it is, but a rideshare opportunity, and I think they do it in DC and other cities as well, where one rider signs on, it's known where that car is and where it's going. If they sign on in a certain way, then the system knows that other people can join the ride.
It's almost like carpooling.
It is. It's carpooling. It's ride sharing with multiple payors. Now, the advantage to the riders is they pay slightly less. The advantage to the driver is they're collecting more revenue over a trip. Disadvantage to the riders are unknown extra time, because when they sign on that way and enable somebody else to join the ride, they don't know how much deviation or how much different traffic or whatever is going to be incurred with the second rider. I'm going to use that question as a way to remind you to think about this in your own businesses. What are ways to enhance your mainline business with just a little tweak? Taking on a second rider, taking on a package, picking up a package. Some of the riders that I've had almost belie the assumption that I've never had a need. A lot of people have multiple cars in their driveways and need a ride somewhere where they're going to pick up another car. That's a good need. Some of the people have kids that they need to get to school, but they've got school in two directions, so they regularly use Uber to have a kid go to school. Is it efficient? From their point of view, it is. Remember, demand is the sum of individual utility curves. There can be a demand for something if one person wants it, or two people want it, or three people want it, so long as they want it more than they want an alternative. The graduate school example that I still live decades later is, you know, buy butter or buy margarine or buy something else. If you think they're all substitutable, then maybe you just deal with price. But what is the comparison? What's the comparable? Rental car revenues or rental car rentals are reportedly, I just heard this morning, are down 11 or 12%. So maybe Uber and Lyft are competing with the established car rental business. I've picked up a lot of people who find it much easier to rent a car. Example, a truck driver or a guy who's sort of in the repo business for trucks comes to town from another city, calls for Uber, gets dropped off where the truck is, and he's off. If he rents a car, he's got an extra hassle, how he's going to shuffle. Chris, you had your hand up.
Oh, no, that was my question, just how it is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I understand the surge pricing, but how is the ride rate scheduled, or how do you figure what it's going to cost to go somewhere?
There's a stated cost per mile and a stated cost per minute. Not unlike regular taxis. It's a combination of the two. And I don't know the exact number now, but I think it's $1 per mile and 12 cents a minute. So the 12 cents a minute can work to a rider's advantage. For 12 cents a minute, I can stop at CVS, spend 10 minutes there, and get my shopping done while I'm on my way to drop my kid off at school. And then I'll get a ride home with the same driver, and it'll cost me less than 10 bucks.
Sure beats sitting in rush hour traffic.
Well, rush hour traffic still happens. And you don't even need,
not driving.
You don't even need rush hour traffic to try and figure out how to get downtown to a rally for the Cavs or a Republican National Convention. Ladies, are we on time for you guys to take over?
One more question.
Okay, one more question. Yes, sir.
I was just curious, do you think Uber could conceivably have enough of an impact where, say, parking lot fees could drop by 5–10%, say, at airports? Because so, you know, you don't have to leave your vehicle when you go to the airport.
Well, if rental car agencies don't need 15% of their space, they could look for alternative source of revenues like parking. Or alternatively, nobody needs the space because Uber drivers are parking the cars in their own garages. So thank you very much. Please try and internalize this in light of your own business. Uber is just a business. Each of you has businesses and business models. It's all the same stuff. They just happen to tweak a few things, take advantage of the internet, and maybe even take advantage of laws, depending on whether you're in Austin, Texas or not. Thank you.